Hello and welcome to today's Permaculture Masterclass, where we dive deep into the many rabbit holes that permaculture opens. Just as the permaculture enthusiast eventually takes a PDC, the PDC graduate eventually goes deeper to levels of mastery and proficiency beyond the PDC. Today, our very special guest is Braden Trauth. Hello, Braden. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Let me read your bio, and then I'll let you speak. Braden's interest in permaculture stems from a background in industrial design. His search for sustainable living and right livelihood took him through several mainstream green endeavors that didn't quite fit the bill. In 2002, he joined the Earthship crew, working with Mike Reynolds to build off-grid homes in the Southwest United States. After selling his own built Earthship, he set out to study permaculture, an adventure that led him to Bill Mollison, Dave Holmgren, Jeff Lawton, Scott Pittman, Peter Bain, Dave Jackie, and many others. He now teaches and demonstrates how to design a life in harmony with the planet in his home bioregion around the Cincinnati area, and through OM Valley Permaculture and Mutualistic Design, product and systems design consultancies based in permaculture and energy theory. He is co-founder of the Cincinnati Permaculture Institute and has helped create the world's first permaculture farm certification, Permaganic Authenticated, which we're here to talk about today, as well as being the board president with Great Rivers and Lakes Permaculture Institute, or GRLPI. Welcome, Braden. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
Where are you coming at us from? Obviously, you live in Cincinnati, but I know you're not there currently. Where are you at, and what's the weather like?
So we are down in Southwest Florida visiting some family that just moved down here not too long ago, and not too far, about an hour away from Echo, just up the road, a well-known permaculture site. Great resource that I've relied on with my work down in Haiti. And yeah, we're just north of the Everglades on the west coast of Florida. And so amazing wildlife. It really makes you understand how estuaries and mangroves are one of the most productive ecosystems in the world. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome. And so for folks who are in the Ohio area, they should be well familiar with you and connect with you. Maybe you could just take us through a very brief overview of your career in permaculture. I know that's asking a lot, but just some of the main stepping stones that you've had from where you started to kind of where you're at now, which I gather is kind of starting a new homestead on an urban site near Cincinnati.
Yeah, so my journey started probably 23 years ago. One of my high school friends, Andy Shavy, he introduced me to permaculture. At that time, I was studying industrial design. I'd gone to school actually for car design, which was a childhood dream, and then eventually found my way into sustainable product design, but I couldn't find the answers I was looking for. That eventually, I designed exhibits at the New England Aquarium, educating people about sustainability up in Boston. And then I eventually found my way out to the Earthships in New Mexico, which is the greenest housing I could find. The gentleman, Mike Reynolds, he is actually a graduate of the university where I now teach and where I also graduated from, University of Cincinnati, the College of DAP. But that eventually, Andy had told me about permaculture, and I didn't get trained until about '06 by Scott Pittman at the Ecoversity in Santa Fe when I was about to sell my Earthship. I asked him if I wanted to teach it, what should I do? He said he should go to Australia and study with Bill. And so I was selling my house. I had a little bit of money. I was like, okay, I guess. And Bill was teaching a course that winter. It was, I think, one of his second last course maybe. And so but in the meantime, I did a teacher training with Peter Bain at Crimpy, Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute, and also visited the Bullock brothers up in Orcas Island, and then flew down to Australia and did a course, did the PDC with Bill Mollison. Darren Doherty was in the audience. And actually, the 2 weeks prior, I emailed David Holmgren, and he said, yeah, him and Sue said, come on down and work on our farm. So
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I worked on their farm for 10 days, having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with David and Sue, and finished his book actually in his living room. I had started reading it, and was, just sort of blown away because this guy was blowing my mind left and right in terms of energy theory and talking about Howard Odom, who actually is from University of Florida, or from Florida,
Oh.
and his work with energy theory and emergy and all that.
Yep.
And then ecosystem productivity and then designing with ecosystems. And so and talking with David, they were very generous and very kind, and stayed on their farm for 10 days, helping him net his orchards from parrots that were raiding the the trees, and then went and studied with Bill, and Jeff Lawton was also teaching that course, and then got to know Bill. Really enjoyed hanging out with him. Also visited a site that Darren Doherty had developed down in Australia, um, as well, and then went up to an eco village in Thailand after that, and then came back home and started teaching with Peter Bain, and then eventually started teaching on our own with our own crew. And that was in '08, our first course. And then we've taught a course every year since. And we now have 15 teachers. We've graduated 200 students.
Excellent.
Eventually started a nursery as well, edible landscape nursery. And so, yeah, those are some of the major highlights. I've worked with the Ministry of Agriculture in Haiti on behalf of USAID as well. Trained a bunch of permaculture or Haitian students down there in permaculture. Some are now national leaders down there.
Wow, that's great.
And then also at some of the national universities in Haiti as well.
Okay, cool. That's a really cool story. And I mean, how lucky and fortunate to have caught Bill before his passing or retirement if he did that ahead of time a little bit. I think there's some clips of that very PDC online that you can see with Darren Doherty, like asking questions and stuff. So is that the one?
I think it was. It may have been the one before. I can't remember if that one was 05 or 07, but it was in the same room at University of Melbourne. And
okay, that's so great.
Darren at that time was working on the cacao farm for M&M Mars in Vietnam.
Right. Yeah, I remember when he was in that phase. Yep. And he's went on to do amazing work with Agrarian Platform. Just a real quick question about your PDC. What format have you settled into, and what allows you to keep it going year after year and for it to be, sustainable for you energy wise and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So we started initially with just a weekend PDC, and we lowered the cost to get people in the door and introduce them to the full comprehensive thought process of a PDC. We had 26 students in that first class in 08, and then we did another one in 09. And then we did every winter we did a weekend PDC. It was between 5 to 8 weekends. And we had a crew of teachers because I didn't feel like I was the biggest plant person at the time or knew enough about our ecosystem. So I brought in other people who were trained in permaculture. One trained at the farm in Tennessee in the 90s. Another was trained in Indiana at a PDC in the early 90s as well. And so they helped out. And then we eventually shifted over the years. After about 6 or 7 years, we went to a year-long model. So one Saturday a month for 13 classes, although we have at the beginning and end, it's a 2-day weekend.
Okay.
And it's nice because you can see permaculture through the seasons. Yes. And that one eventually, it now draws in more students. And we teach 2 PDCs, the winter weekend still, which is the short condensed, get you out the door before spring and get you planting. And then the year long where we start in November, with a big harvest meal, kick off the class, and then go through the entire year and wrap up in October. And now we also offer them for the last 8 years at University of Cincinnati, which is also a 2 course, 6 credit hour course.
Great.
And then last year we started working with Antioch College in Yellow Springs and doing a similar hybrid. And I've now handed off a lot of those courses to my other colleagues, Doug Crouch, Susan Vonderhaar. Doug Crouch with Trio Permaculture, he's taught around the world for years. And then Susan Vonderhaar she's taught with us for years. She has a master's in, I think, environmental studies or biology or something like that. So, and now I'm actually full-time at UC at the University of Cincinnati teaching industrial design with a focus on sustainable products through the lens of permaculture. So,
cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I hope you have really good impact in that role. Last question, and then we'll get into the Permaganics because I'm really wanting to talk about that.
Yeah.
And we had a couple requests for that, by the way. I
Nice.
think people are aware of it, but maybe haven't fully explored it. So this would be a great chance for at least the PINA audience to get a full scope of what it is and maybe what it isn't.
Yeah.
But real quick, your relationship with Earthships. What's your reflections now? Would you want to live in one again? I know there are a lot of work to build. Would
Yeah.
you ever want to be involved in building one again? What's your experience?
I always said I would build my own.
It'll take you 5 years.
Yeah. And I had a lot of friends who, some even up 13 years.
Jeez.
And yeah, I mean, they work well. They are, I mean, it's nice because when you're done, you're done.
Right.
Mine was, I actually, strangely enough, I bought it as a bank foreclosure. It was the first Earthship bank foreclosure. And then fixed it up and lived in it for a couple years. And my intention was always to come back to Ohio, where my family has deep roots. And I really loved it. And the biggest thing is you have to adapt it to your climate. I've seen some that were built, off of what they do in New Mexico. New Mexico is a very specific climate. It's cold, it's dry, and there's not a lot of wood. So, if you're building one in the Midwest, the southern Midwest, I would say you really got to deal with heat and humidity is your biggest challenge. In the north, you're probably a little bit better because they're similar climate. They're zone 4 in New Mexico, in Taos, New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
It's cold.
That's surprising.
Yeah. And also some of the modern, more recent updates in the last 10 or so years, 15 years, with the double greenhouses and things like that really make a huge difference. Mine did not have that. Mine was a 2-story one, and it had sloped glass and vertical glass. Sloped glass on the upstairs, vertical glass on the downstairs. The downstairs was always comfortable. The upstairs was always too hot or too cold. So it really showed me, though, that it works. And that Earthship, despite its failings, the coldest I ever saw it get, it was minus 23 degrees. It was a cloudy day, so no solar gain. It was snowing outside and windy. And at 11 o'clock at night, I had no heat, and it was 50 degrees inside. So 73 degrees above the outside, very little winterization, if you will. Like, I could have added another double greenhouse, more insulative doors, and sealed them up better. I got a wood stove then for those really cold nights.
Yeah.
But it, and then in the summer, they could get too hot, especially the sloped glass. So vertical glass was better. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's cool. I've never actually been involved in any of those projects or been in one. But it's always been a fascination, and it's a promise in permaculture is like the passive heating and cooling house design, of which there's many iterations, but the Earthship is maybe amongst the most sexy. So that's cool. All right. Well, how about we hop in? I think you have a couple slides, or if you want to just take it away with some like preamble before we talk about Permaganics, but I'll just leave it to you, and I might jump in here and there. Otherwise, take it away.
Yeah, I will start off with a video that you can, if this doesn't stream that well, because I'm streaming from my end, the video. It is on YouTube if you look up Permaganic Authenticated. But hopefully it goes well. It's only a 3-4 minute video. And
it looks, I think you can,
okay.
You can hear it.
Pretty soon going to be launching a agricultural certification.
It really could be something impactful for the world.
Permaculture is a design science modeled after the regenerative principles of nature. Using permaculture methods, people can even recharge the water cycle in water tables, stop erosion, protect and enhance biodiversity, sequester significant amounts of carbon dioxide, regreen desert areas, and work towards creating a completely local-based, fossil fuel-free economy, all while providing for their basic needs.
We are certifying farms and organizations who are moving toward creating a regenerative agriculture and regenerative culture. Regenerative systems are those that go beyond being merely sustainable and actually build and enhance ecological capital. Ceasing to use synthetic chemicals should be the bare minimum standard in agriculture. They also develop social and cultural systems that reflect these ethical principles.
Why we started working on this project was because we saw that a lot of needs that could be addressed by integrating different principles into agricultural systems were not being addressed by strict agricultural certifications.
Key is that the integrity is always maintained, that the highest is always sought in terms of creating a truly regenerative culture and a regenerative agriculture.
Bill Mollison founded permaculture on the three ethics: earth care, people care, and what is presently referred to as fair share. This certification system gives credit to growers in all three ethics. When starting out on the path of permaculture, many people are coming from other places in the field of sustainable agriculture. It may take time to transition to a completely regenerative system, and that's why we've structured the certification so that we have 3 stages modeled for the 3 stages of forest succession. The logo reflects the 3 ethics and the 3 stages, and so communicates to your customers about what you do and where you are on the path to reaching your goals. Pioneer stage. This stage is a low-hanging fruit for most sustainable growers. It's an easy transition from traditional and/or organic agriculture. Emergent. This stage is where a farmer begins to lay increasingly solid foundations for a regenerative culture. And regenerative. At this stage, a farm attains full regenerative sustainability. Similar to a natural ecosystem, it reflects the principles and ethics that build ecological capital.
How does this certification program work? You, the grower, apply to be certified. Your farm or operation will be visited by an assessment professional. This is an enjoyable, educational process where both parties will give and receive feedback. The assessment professional will tour your farm, take photos, and interview you. Within 4 weeks' time, you will receive a starter package with permission to use the logo for use on signage and labeling. The package will also contain educational materials for you to display at your farm stand, advocating for why customers should support permaculture. You will also have a page on our website where customers can see your photos or videos of your farm and read about the practices you use.
It's not too far of a leap to think that we could have a system where it is almost like a Garden of Eden.
Using sustainable practices as the base level and then evolving more towards a regenerative system modeled after nature. Nature's 2 billion years of success. We can overcome these shortcomings and really hit ideally a new age of humanity that is truly embodying a fully global culture. Healing the earth, healing the damage that has been done for 10,000 years or so. Well, we invite people to come and get on board, participate in the process, offer feedback, get certified. Really, I mean, our goal is just to raise awareness and leverage this to the next level because it's ultimately to all of our great-great-grandchildren's interests of every species, especially the human species on this earth right now.
So
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's a great overview.
yeah, that was a video that we made about 11 years ago, and when we were about to launch, and it gives a nice overview. And actually, my friend Angela, as you saw in that video, her and her husband actually had the initial idea. They eventually became students and did our permaculture class, and then we talked to Dave Jackie, who I had known, I trained with after studying with Mollison and everyone. And Dave was like, "Yeah, I don't know anyone doing it." And then my buddy Doug Crouch, he was working with Dr. Elaine Ingham, as her TA at Maharishi University. And she was like, "I would put my name behind it." And so she helped us leverage that. And then we worked with some graphic designers who did work for Procter and Gamble. Hey, let's use their tools to try to impact and bring this stuff as mainstream as possible. It was an independent design firm in town, but they came up with all the graphics and logos, and then we eventually got it approved by the USPTO. So I'll share some slides here that I put together. That is about and this is a little bit of my background. We touched upon most of it. I've just a couple of years ago, I started working in industrial design, coming back to what I had started with. Let me go to full screen here too, just for better.
Yeah, that'll look a little bebetter.
There we
That's
go.
a great photo, though, of you and Bill.
Yeah, he's a funny guy.
I'm sure.
We had a good time. A lot of the students did, hanging out with him, and as well as I did with David Holmgren. I took that picture of David at his homestead.
Oh, was that David? Oh, okay.
Yeah. And just walking, he gave me a tour of his farm, and I think I was just dumbfounded and speechless that I was just hanging out with this guy. But anyways, I mean, it's impressive what he did. So
yeah.
But yeah, I've gone on and worked at numerous universities, and started the institute and all that. And so now we have students, really trying to apply it, and really because climate change is such a huge challenge. That's why I was willing to take this job at the university, because our students do actually go on and work for some of the biggest companies in the world. And for them to understand, at least the basics of what has become regenerative agriculture, and being able to apply that then hopefully these farms could start to transition and sequester enough carbon to hopefully keep the climate within a stable window of production. And that was obviously the inspiration for Permaganic. It's interesting because, having done permaculture for years, and training people and having lived sustainably, and I could live fully off the grid myself out, somewhere. But I realized that if we don't get as many people doing this stuff as possible, systems change, and they oftentimes don't succeed in that change. And, so that's what led me to some of this, and, really being able to, well, you'll see in some of the slides, but, I had some feedback that was like, why do we need a certification? And it's like, well, in complex systems, it can help. So this is the logo that we came up with.
Yeah, great logo.
Yeah, thank you. Originally, I was just thinking we were going to do farm, just permaculture farming. And then Luke and Angela were like, no, we should expand it. And I was like, well, what if we do the 3 ethics of permaculture? And so that's what we ended up bringing in, was the earth care, people care, and fair share. And so everyone knows USDA organic, and it's based on the same premise. However, organic is only the beginning. It only verifies chemical free. It doesn't verify regenerative practices that heal the earth. So organic is great. It's a step in response to industrial agriculture. Same with biodynamic agriculture, which Rudolf Steiner also replied, to industrial agriculture and similar processes. He obviously brings in some other aspects, but none of them really look to nature as permaculture does, and as a process. And when you observe nature, it's impressive what nature does when we're not messing with it. And if we can understand how nature does its thing and mimic that, then hopefully we could sequester large amounts of carbon. And so here's what if you could reverse climate change, droughts and desertification, and species extinction, all with your purchases. So this is sort of the vision of what's possible. And that's where, Permaganic comes in. And then as we worked on it, we eventually laid out that, well, not every farm is going to be the highest performing permaculture farm right off the bat, as we all know. So we wanted to make it accessible to organic farmers and transitioning from organic to this regenerative model. So the pioneer model is basically that you're laying the groundwork, if you will, to move away from unsustainable practices, especially tillage specifically. Emergent is when you're really laying out the infrastructure, be it keyline design processes, perennial farming processes, also educating people is a piece. And I'll get into that here with some of the details of each element: earth care, people care, and fair share. And then regenerative being the highest standard. So, and also having a logo that conveys that to the customer. That's a key element that we have here. The video, actually, we hadn't quite solidified the emergent, the pioneer.
Yes, I really like that the logo shows the transition actually occurring once you know to decipher it. I
Yeah,
also just want to highlight, and you may mention this at some point, but like some people in permaculture talk about the transitional ethic, where it's like, yes, we uphold these like lofty ethics, right? But it's really a vector direction that
yeah,
we're aiming toward. And yeah, we all start somewhere. And if you
yeah,
happen to have been raised in industrial agriculture or something like that, it's like it's
yeah,
going to take some time and it's going to take some steps, and it may not even all, you may not get to full permaculture, whatever that is,
yeah.
in your lifetime,
Oh
right? I
yeah,
mean, we're
yeah,
talking about like seventh generation thinking. So
yeah,
I love that your model sort of takes that into account and doesn't punish people for that, or but like
yeah.
welcomes in people who are just on that first couple of steps.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, we need to figure out how to help everyone move to these scenarios. And I mean, talking with Holmgren and talking about uh, Howard Odom and his work in energy theory, and you just realize like we're all drunk on cheap energy, basically. And nature doesn't work that way. Nature works off of one day's solar gain. And if we can understand how to build our homes, our farms, our communities, our businesses, even that mimic that and don't exploit the next 7 generations' opportunities, then we can have that and build these transitional systems and cultures. And it's complex. And I mean, there's 8 billion people on Earth, and that's primarily because of 7 billion is really because of industrialization, and all the great things that it's brought with it. And there's wonderful thing. I mean, working in Haiti and having a farmer come up to us with his hand hacked open from a machete, you're like, it really makes you appreciate a medical system.
Yes.
you know,
Or as Andrew Faust says, it's like, I really love running water. I mean, like, I
yes,
don't want to go back,
yeah, yes. Like, I don't want to have to drink a bottle of whiskey while my hand is sutured up, and
Yeah.
running water to just be able to have a shower is amazing, and fresh drinking water, having ancestors from Europe, which was a cesspool. That's what I tell a lot of people from the Middle Ages. That's why we drank alcohol, because you didn't have clean drinking water.
That's right.
We didn't understand the systems. We didn't understand the ecological systems that we've evolved out of, and now we do. It's impressive to be down here near the Everglades and to understand the complexity of such a system that most people just don't even think or understand what's going on, and how it's evolved to manage big storms, all kinds of stuff. But I could go on and on. But so really bringing organic to the next level. And this, I've known Mark Shepard for years. After I came back studying with Bill, a local farmer had brought him down to consult on their farm in northern Kentucky. I had read his articles previously in the Activist magazine about his farm. I've been up there as well. Mark's a great guy. He's doing some real tough pioneering work. And he's successful at it, which is great. And it's probably one of the largest farms in the Midwest that I know of, and probably one of the larger in the country, if not the largest. And I might have the amount of acreage that he has off. I can't remember if it's 100 or 160, but connecting someone like him or other farmers along those lines, and people like Joel Salatin. I've heard some things about him in the recent years, but both of them years ago, I presented this idea to them. Joel apparently wasn't too big into it because his name always preceded himself. Mark had some interest, but to their customers, and that's the purpose of a certification is to, if you're not a big name, you're not a published author, that how do you get recognition for the work that you're doing? To build a regenerative farm and a regenerative culture And that's what the certification is, to inform customers of your hard work and let them know that you are meeting that standard. And so that through their, well, as long as we're in an industrial society, as Toby Hemingway points out in the Permaculture City, like zoning out your food sources. Yes, it's great to grow as much as possible, and it's a great standard, but a lot of people don't have that capacity. And so being able to create a transition while we still can, and not just run off a cliff, transition is really critical. So I'm not a fan of collapse. So
Yes, exactly. Nobody wants that.
no, the Dark Ages after the Roman Empire collapsed, it took a long time to recover from, and not a pleasant experience. So
yeah, that's not how we want to see permaculture manifest. I mean, it probably will to a degree after a collapse because it's going to be necessary, but preferably we could do it in a smooth way.
Yes, and having kids, I'm like, I wouldn't have had kids if I wasn't hopeful. And knowing that there are solutions to these problems, it's just scaling them up, really. And then, ultimately building cultures, hopefully, that they can participate in and help create. Children are their own entities, and there's a lot of things in the world that can attract you to other things. Whether they do permaculture or not is up to them. But I would hope they do. So, but giving these opportunities while there's still a high energy culture that's still functioning, to give these opportunities to allow farmers to invest in their farms and get recognition and make a living. Farming is hard. It is not easy. There's no guarantees. Things happen. And industrial farming, we know it doesn't work. We know it's brittle. Permaculture is hopefully this transitional model that can bring people away from that. So, a lot of the practices that we're working with, I did forget to mention that I did do the carbon farming class back in 2012 up in New York. And that was where we had our soft launch. And, Eric Tonesmeyer was there, Darren Doherty, Joel Salatin, Dr. Ingham, Dave Jackie, Holistic Management International with Dr. Adams. Yeah, it was. Wes Jackson, too.
Yeah.
And so it was a 3-week course. But almost all those practices, and Eric Tonesmeyer ended up becoming the drawdown.org's one of their fellows. They had a lot of fellows, but he brought a lot of the regenerative agriculture to their awareness and identified it as one of the top strategies that we could employ to reverse climate change, of which, Permaganic Authenticated is, certifying those practices, and that,
right.
Be it regenerative agriculture, be it, another one is tropical tree staple crops, which one of my Haitian students was with an NGO down in Haiti, doing that kind of work. So drawdown.org, great resource. I show this to my students all the time because it gives you awareness that there are solutions to problems, and especially climate change. That's what got me into sustainable design 25 years ago. So the program itself, it's a comprehensive certification process. As we mentioned, there's Earth Care, People Care, Fair Share. We have the Pioneer, Emergent, Regenerative model. And we actually, a little side note, we did actually approach Rodale as well through the help of Dr. Ingham when she was the head scientist there. They said they'd work with us, and then they eventually backed off. We kept working on launching ours. We got ours approved by the USPTO, and then 6 months later, actually, Rodale launched their own, and it looks very similar to what we had brought to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They, instead of having Earth Care, People Care Fair, they have Earth Care, Animal Welfare, and People Care. Instead of Pioneer, Emergent, Regenerative, they have Bronze, Silver, and Gold. Not the biggest fan of those. Those are finite resources, but
yes, exactly. Maybe do they not necessarily fully align with permaculture? Or, I mean, I don't know that you know that, but
I think that Rodale, J.I. Rodale has a long history with Mollison, but he they always, I think, and I always liken it to LEED versus living building challenge. LEED is more about trying to inch the existing system in that direction. And that's, I feel like, the approach that they ended up interpreting it as. We've always had this status that you either get there, you set the highest bar, and that's our goal.
Right.
And they're very amenable to to annuals and, not agroforestry systems. So, and I think they also, from what I've gathered, is that they really, I think, wanted numerous certifications to come together and rally around something. And they did get Demeter and a few others. I always thought about approaching them, but I was always worried that theirs is just not a high enough standard to where we are. And so it's like, I'd rather sort of stick with, making sure that we keep moving in that direction. Whether it's hard for me to say, but I do want them to succeed. We need all hands on deck. And when we approached them, we did not have them sign a non-disclosure agreement, which is very common in these types of things. Because I was like, hey, if they can do a better job than us, go for it. And they've gotten Patagonia on board. You can buy regenerative organic certified clothes from them. And, so, but we realize that, there's, as I tell my students and I teach in design, just because, just because the Model T was made didn't mean that we stopped making better cars.
Right.
So the more people we can bring on board, and actually now I also, we got Dr. Ann Adams. She expressed interest with Holistic Management International. They have now launched their own called Land to Market as well. So, the more the merrier. And hopefully, with the more, just as in nature, some of us will succeed, and hopefully solve these issues. An oak tree throws out tens of thousands of seeds a year, probably.
That's right.
Not all of them survive. So
yeah, that's right. I'm with you.
Yeah. So this here, and we, that's why we keep chugging along. We're still small. We don't have the resources that Rodale did, but we keep pushing forward because we feel like it's important. So, and we have numerous certified farms, as you'll see. But so this is some of the details of the certification. Let me go back to this one. But basically, the pioneer is like that you're starting to lay the foundations. The emergent, as I mentioned before, you're implementing things like orcharding and agroforestry. At this point, you're really shifting towards perennials, no tillage. Pioneer, you're also doing no tillage, doing compost teas, mob grazing, things like that. The higher you go, though, you're implementing more long-term systems that are not easy to back out of. So once you commit to putting in a keyline design system, be it with a keyline subsoiler or swales or ponds or all that, and once you plant an orchard on contour, if you will, your chances of backing out are, and going back to an industrial model or even organic model are not that great. And so that's why the emergent, you're really laying that foundation, and then regenerative is when you're really implementing it. The earth care is agriculture, as I mentioned. So you might be doing mob grazing and things like that. People care has two elements, which is community care and doing educational outreach. And so that could be giving farm tours of your farm to so many people a year. So as you can see, the highest level here, and some of these have changed, but as you'll see in the agriculture stuff, but the community care, if you gave a tour a 1 hour tour to 2,000 people a year, that would qualify for it. Or if you trained 3 interns for a whole year for 40 hours a week, that's 120 hours a week. Really at that point, you're talking about 10 weeks or something. So 10 weeks of interns. So that would also qualify. But then we also have the built environment, which incorporates people care. So you've got the educational element, building this culture and informing the world. And then the built environment is real basic, starting off with an energy audit and doing water harvesting. And then the emergent level is energy creation and water harvesting. And then the built regenerative level is off-grid or net yield, net positive. So similar to Living Building Challenge or an Earthship, or that you're producing more than your building is consuming. And then the fair share, we have two elements there as well, which is the community aspect and then the ecological aspect. And, some people, we've tried to be flexible with this because we know farming's a hard profession, but that you could be donating excess production that isn't being sold to a local community nonprofit that deals with food access. But here we have community donations for the pioneer level of 5% of harvest. The emergent level is 10% donated. And again, that could just be produce that didn't sell that day at market and isn't going to last. And then regenerative is your farm creates and supports new structures for reliable distribution of surplus services, time, etc., to support the creation of a regenerative culture. So that one, it's sort of, we have several organizations that are doing this. And so it is a tough, high standard at the regenerative level.
Yeah, it's like you're creating a food hub or something like that.
Exactly.
At that level. Yeah.
And really looking at a community, how do we create fair share within the community? And that is an important aspect of permaculture. Every time I hear people planet profit, I'm like, if you listen to the order of that, there's something off. And the people is first, the planet is second, and the profit is third. Whereas permaculture is very intentional. And I always feel like, I don't know the story of people planet profit, but I hear a lot of it around, in sustainable business. But earth care is very intentional. Earth care is first, because if you don't take care of it, people don't get taken care of. You can end up with famines. And then the fair share, or return the surplus to the first two ethics, which is what Mollison says, but we like to say fair share because it's simple and it rhymes. But return it to the first two. And so that's what you see here. And with the ecological one, 5% of your land is dedicated to ecosystem restoration. And I can skip ahead here. Let me do that because that'll give a little bit more. So here you can see the emergent.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 10% is donated. Then ecological, 25% of land is dedicated to ecosystem restoration. 8% of that could be wild or managed, and managed wilds, which could be harvested. It could be sustainably timbered. And then 17% could be regenerative agriculture. The highest standard here is 50% of fair share, which is 10% of wild or managed wilds. And then 40% regenerative agriculture. So we haven't set the uttermost highest bar. And the one thing I will say, and this will get into the next couple slides, is that, and this is Mollison's farm here, but that this is also an evolutionary process, this certification. But Mollison's would qualify for that. That to me was always the standard. His Tagari farm, which
did you get to go there while you were there with him, or no?
I did not.
Okay.
I wish I would have. I don't think he had it at the time, but I did actually try to go to Jeff Lawton's Zaytunya farm, and that didn't work out. But but actually, one of our local teachers, she used to run Jeff's nonprofit. She doesn't teach with us anymore, but she ran Jeff's nonprofit, and she's from Claremont County, Ohio.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. And she ran it the year after I was there, and I used to get emails from Jeff, from her, Sakina. And then she came back and taught with us for a bit. And now she actually met through the Islamic community with Jeff, and Jeff's wife being Jordanian. But she is now very involved with social work and things like that. But I didn't get to visit, but Mollison's is a great example of where, I always tell, like, when we're talking about drought issues, like Mollison's farm had 3 2-inch pipes of water coming off of it at all times because he had turned the farm into a sponge, in terms of swales and ponds and forests and building soil, and all of that holds water and stabilizes the hydrological cycle, which is how humans could, as I always tell my students, referencing the book 1491 that Scott Pittman told us about.
Yeah.
About how the Amazon rainforest could be a human-created artifact. And it's
Yeah.
like, we can either dehydrate landscapes or hydrate, and it just depends on our design process. So,
yeah, there's China's doing sponge city designs. I don't know if you've come across that, but it's
cool.
very similar. Just the idea of like, instead of fighting against all these water issues that we have, like just design things to be sponges in the first place. And Bill's doing it here. I mean, you can just see the landscape just dotted with water features, and it's great.
And his neighbors during the dry season, from what I've heard, is that they didn't have water. They were brown, they completely dried out, and his farm was.
They're like looking over the fence, like, what's he doing?
How is that guy doing?
Yeah.
And that was what PAM. I mean, the roots of PAM and keyline design and all that. Just
That's
like,
right.
and it's interesting because being in the Midwest, I always say that our legacy and heritage. One of our local teachers, her husband is an archaeologist, and has done a lot of work at Fort Ancient, which is right off I-71, which cuts across Ohio. Fort Ancient was, I forget how old it is, 3,000 years old, something. I don't know. It might be newer than that, but it was water harvesting. The mound building culture had a lot of water harvesting.
Right. That makes sense. I never thought about that.
Huh. Yeah. And some of it became sacred, like Serpent Mound and Circle Mounds. But, oftentimes something that's critical in your culture becomes sacred inherently. So, so out of it, they build these other types of mounds. But Fort Ancient is up on top of a ridge. It's a very dry ridge. And then it has these big divots. And basically her and her husband, they wrote an article for the Permaculture Activist magazine years ago, before his design magazine, about the water management of that site. So
great.
So, it's not exclusive to, permaculture, but, I always say permaculture is the best process we have for deindustrialization. So, in terms of finding free resources, which is what industrialization was all about, quote unquote free, you drill the ground, or your Jed Clampett shooting the ground. We got oil. But, so we did go through the process and get the USPTO approval, as you can see, March 21st, 2017. It was quite a process. We worked with some trademark lawyers that did their work pro bono through local arts organizations, and did get approval.
Great.
And it required a lot of processes. So it is protected, which basically means that, if you don't have this protection, you can't hold anyone accountable if someone rips it off. So this allows you to hold people, if a farm really is regenerative and they earn this certificate or this certification, then, they deserve the recognition, not someone who's not really doing the real deal. So, and we have a plan. We had to file it with the USPTO because ultimately a certification mark is a specific type of trademark. I had to learn a lot of legalese, invisible structures. And there is something beneficial about that, which is that basically a certification mark is not owned by us. It's owned by the people who are certified.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So ultimately what will happen is once we get 100 farms, and this is what we filed with them, once we get 100 farms nationally, then we'll create a national standards board, and they will be appointed to run the certification. And that board is made up of experts in all areas of permaculture. So everything from the farming to the food processing to architecture and building, and representatives. And then there's also representatives of each bioregional standards board. So similar to PINA, we recognize that you can't have one sweeping certification because Arizona's climate and farming processes are very different than Maine or Florida.
Yes.
So we had to have standards. And so that bioregional standards board down here, the second bullet point is the bioregional councils are enacted when 100 farms are achieved in a bioregion. And those are made up of the Bioregional Research Council, which basically would be working with some of the farmers to try to do research to come up with better practices. We want this to evolve and say, well, we don't want that cultivar of apple in this region because it doesn't work, or we don't want, or we know that swales in this type of soil don't work.
Yep.
In our region in Cincinnati, we have shale limestone soils, and building swales on these hillsides, especially if there's any built structures, can create landslides. So
yeah,
you really want to have experts that are doing research and really getting to know a region's soils, which is what that's what our land grant universities were supposed to do. And they did, but they just responded to industrialization, because industrialization destroys markets, and cheap energy makes time and a lot. It basically collapses markets, if you will. So
yeah, and local knowledge and local culture.
Yep, and practices and things that people evolved with. Every culture around the world, we had to have that knowledge, and industrialization just eradicated it because of markets. And so as we try to rebuild that, it'd be great if land grant universities got back on board, and I think some are trying to, and we are actually trying to work right now with one, but it's a transition process, so it's tricky. And then we also have this bioregional standards board, which would aggregate research data into standards, and this would hopefully be made up of people. And the challenge with organic is that some of that became such an industry that some of those standards have been weakened. So for us to always look to nature, that is the key. So so here's this is a great chart. I forget where I got it. I think I got it from Wes Jackson, actually, and he got it from someone else. But it's just all the different climates around the world, and from polar, cold, to tropical at the bottom, from dry to wet, dry on the left, wet on the right. And so every ecosystem would have its own practices, not just agriculture, but also architecturally, and then also culturally. What resources. It's interesting because teaching at a design school, like clothes, local clothes were made from, like my family. Cincinnati is a very big German heritage, and going to Oktoberfest and people wearing lederhosen, which is leather pants. You did that because that's how that was the resources you had to make clothes. So everything in a culture, and this is what I love about permaculture and what Mollison really pieced together, is how cultures arise out of the landscapes. Exactly. And the more you can understand and create standards that ensure the productivity of these ecosystems, the better. And hopefully moving towards more humid climate or wet production climates rather than deserts, which is what we've been doing for 10,000 years. So the current cost to get certified, we've tried to keep it cheap. I think this is pretty cheap, especially competitive with organic. It's $400 for the initial certification, and then for every farm over 20 acres, it's at $25, and then $1 every acre after that. And then also travel time, because we don't have a lot of certifiers. We really only have the capacity to manage the Midwest. However, if anyone wants to become a certifier, we encourage them to contact us, because we would love to have this go across the country. And hopefully we can then train them if they're not already well trained, and working with local farms to try to get them certified. But anything over 30 minutes, we try to remunerate those people for their time. And then annual auditing is, so if you're in the pioneer level, it's $200. If you're in the emergent level, it's $300, but it's every other year, so you're saving $50 a year. And then regenerative is every third year, so it drops to $100 per year. And so we're actually trying to use reverse economics, if you will, or incentives, that the higher you go, the less it costs. So
I like that. It's a reward built in.
It is. And, that's our goal, is to create more regenerative farms. We don't want people to stay at the pioneer level. We want them to move to regenerative, and then, and hopefully saving money, which that is, saving $300 or $100 every year. So, and we do have our first certified farms. Quite a few of them have been honorary, because for us to even qualify for the federal certification mark program, we had to go across state lines. Unfortunately, Cincinnati is within 5 minutes of Kentucky and 30 minutes of Indiana. So
start there.
Yeah. So that allowed us to become to go fall under federal jurisdiction at that point. But we have certified farms in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, and New Mexico. So, but we do have our several paying farms now as we continue to grow. And you can see actually the Permaganic Eco Youth Garden, which my friends Luke and Angela, who created this with me, they started this garden in the inner city of Cincinnati, which in that video you saw a lot of pictures of. They've been working with inner city youth to teach them how to grow organic food for 15, 20 years. The garden there has been there for maybe 25 years. They got involved maybe 20 plus years ago, and it's great because now some of the students who've come out of that program, they now help run the program, and they have some wild stories, everything from, the one gentleman, he's like, yeah, all my friends either had babies, got shot, or ended up in jail. And because of this garden,
Wow.
I have none of that.
I've dodged all that. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And he's got a good job, and he helps with the garden now. And so it spawned out of this. And so you can see that at the top here. We also gave an honorary certification to the Neem Karoli Baba Ashram and Hanuman Temple out in Taos, New Mexico, which, if you're familiar with Ram Dass's work, that he helped set that up.
Cool.
And then one of our former students, Greensleeves Farm down in Kentucky, it's now shifted hands. It's now called Cider Ridge Farm. She's the one who actually brought Mark Shepard down.
Oh yeah, that's right. I met you there. I was at that event, which was great. Yeah. It was forever ago. So
yeah, that was 11 years ago, and that was when I gave Mark Shepard a packet about this, actually.
Oh, okay.
And she had brought him down actually 6 years prior, and so she had worked with him quite a bit. But really cool farm.
What's the one in Michigan? I'm in Michigan.
Peter Bain and Keith Johnson.
Great. That makes sense.
And then we also have Russin Family Farms up in Clare, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
And they are certified. They're working towards, and they also have the climate change project. I forget the exact CCP something, but it's Russin Family Farms, and they moved to Michigan and are really, big on trying to reverse climate change, and so really great farm. So
excellent.
And then years ago, I was working with UC on some of their business incubator stuff, and someone pulled up this quote, which I was impressed to hear. And this is just how industry has a lot of interest in this, which is where Rodale's certification comes in. But General Mills even wants to do regenerative agriculture. They're going to have 1 million acres of farmland by 2030. No, we're halfway there. Yeah. We're halfway there. I don't know if they're there, but I do know a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to transition this stuff. And, industrial farming is hard to transition. So I hope that they're successful. I know, as I mentioned, Patagonia, even Dr. Bronner's, they are also on board with Rodale's, or regenerative organic certified. So
Yeah.
some of our team, Luke and Angela and Peter Bain, and then really we're looking to get more farms certified, more certifiers around the country. This is not, we're just helping facilitate this thing. So getting more volunteers to help us grow around the Midwest and the country would be great. And so, we're always, it is, let me stop sharing here. But yeah, we are always looking at trying to scale it up. And I have a lot of stuff on my plate, but this is something that I believe in, and continue to try to scale up, because it is. I mean, first off, to get to a certification mark is a tough task. So,
Yeah.
to have this much, invested resources, and I didn't mention that GRLPI took it over about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So
I
I
was
should,
wondering that.
yeah. So it started at the Eco Garden. It was their idea. Eventually they realized, like, we don't have the capacity to manage this. And so now it's transitioned over to the GRLPI. We worked out an MOU. And so if you go to greatriversandlakes.org, you'll see on our website there. I could actually share my screen there.
I just pulled up permaganic.org when I was looking at your slide. Is that still relevant for people, or should they just go to Great Lakes and Rivers?
Yeah, go to Great Lakes and Rivers. I'm typing it in right now. Let's see here. Permaganic. Why is it not sharing? Let's see here. It's not pulling up. It should be great. Oh, it's Great Rivers and Lakes. Sorry about that.
I do that too. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I always flip around. Is it rivers first or lakes first?
Yeah.
Eventually I get it.
Yeah. Great Rivers. Oh, I'd forgotten S. There we go. There we go. Okay, I'll share my screen here.
Yeah, go for it.
And but yeah, there we go. So we are the Midwest PINA hub, bioregional hub.
Yep.
And basically, working with Peter over the years, it was like, this is, and even when the Eco Garden hosted it, the Permaganic Eco Garden, it was like, really, they don't have the capacity. Like, we almost need a professional organization. And then when GRLPI came along, it was like, this is perfect, to really host such a thing. So this is our website, getting recognized. This is moving slow. It's moving slowly, but some of the slides that we saw before. And so, and some of the benefits for farmers, but let me go back to end customers.
Yeah.
And then there is a form on here to get certified. We do have a list of our authenticated farms and homesteads here.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the size. What constitutes a farm? Is there a too small?
No, I mean, obviously with hydroponics and all that, we wouldn't be certifying that.
Yeah, that's not really permaculture. Yeah. I mean, not to be rude, but just because it's not using soil.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe aquaponics, like, up in,
yep.
with like Will Allen and all that.
Yeah, totally. So as long as, are farms required to then be, scheduling taxes as a Schedule F or something like that in order to be officially a farm, in order to qualify, or not necessarily?
And we've had discussions about this. Like, we could certify like schools and just, sites, education sites. We haven't gone down that rabbit hole, but we could.
And maybe most commonly, I'm thinking like homesteads, where it's like,
yes.
This is we sell a little bit of excess or whatever, but really we're a homestead.
Yeah, and homesteads would be okay for that. The biggest thing for me, and I'm the worst salesperson in the world. That's why I'm into permaculture.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's why you're a permaculturist.
Yeah, I will talk myself out of buying anything or selling anything. But but the but if you have a farm that is selling something, then you might want that. And if you're selling at wholesale, then yes, even more so,
Yeah,
because you are getting further and further away from your customers.
right.
So here's our form that will basically just kick an email to us,
Great.
and then get in touch with you. But yeah, this is all, and it would be great to eventually have it on a national scale.
Absolutely.
Right now, we only have the capacity for the Midwest. So,
But depending on demand, right? Like as more people come in and if they're elsewhere, then maybe it starts to build itself in that way.
yeah, if anyone is a leader in a region and is like, "Hey, I want to do that," yes, contact us. Um, if you're out in Oregon, if you're up in Maine, if you're down in Texas, whatever,
Mhm.
and let us know. And we would. That's our goal, is to spread this far and wide. And and the hardest thing about doing a certification mark is that at the end of the day, it's very much a marketing thing.
Right.
It's informing people about a process on a farm. And it takes a lot of money to do marketing.
Yeah.
And so, and for us, we've always had this chicken or egg thing. It's like, and the other thing too is that I think we're so far ahead of the curve that we need more regenerative farms.
Yes.
And again, the chicken or the egg. Like, am I going to invest and transition my 100-acre farm towards this stuff? And someone like Joel Salatin, he had this capacity to figure out how to make his farm work financially. And there's a lot of other farms that I know that have tried to do this stuff and weren't successful because of the finances. So this is hopefully a tool to do that. And then the other thing too, and is certifying products. And so right now we're only certifying farms, but if there were products out there, we could eventually do that as well.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, especially on the Mark Shepard sort of scale, like the Organic Valley sort of side of things. That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah.
And I'll just say from the PINA side, because of course I'm working with PINA currently, and we're trying to grow the bioregional sort of network, grow it, and hopefully it starts to become its own generative thing that, everybody's always low on time, energy, and money. So that's just, that is what it is. But as we try to get more resources, and we are getting more resources into PINA, hopefully we can play a role in bringing the Permaganic standards, at least to our bioregional partners, so that they are not only just aware of it, but also maybe promoting it to all the cool people that they're associated with in those networks.
I mean, ultimately, I would see, PINA as a great facilitator of it, and just given, and, it takes time to build these structures, and it takes education first, and then figuring out like how to make a living doing it.
Yeah.
For us, it's, always been, how do we create as many, people making a living doing this stuff? And homesteading is the first step. The second step is, any extra money that you may need to live is doing it in a way that is permaculturally oriented.
Yeah.
But I know, and some of our students, have really great farms. And farming is as I've said, is a tough field, like
Absolutely.
Ever since, Earl Butts, go big or get out, it is. And it's interesting too, because looking nationally at, I've always wondered, I'm like, what is the main driver of the US federal government? And to me, it's like jobs and keeping prices low at all costs. And food was one of the first things, I think, to really, especially in the 70s, to really take that hit, and great responses such as Farm Aid and permaculture and other things like that have played a critical role, and even organic farming too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
Well, thanks for this, Braden. I'd love to talk more, but I know we're up against a little time window here, and I want to be respectful of your time. So just feel free, open invite, come back anytime to talk about what's going on in the Great Lakes Rivers sort of world or your own personal stuff. Go ahead. If there's anything you want to sort of promote or point people to, now's a great time to do it.
Yeah, I forgot. I should have mentioned too that we are having our Midwest Permaculture Conference next weekend. A week from today, we'll kick off on Friday evening, June 28th.
June 28th.
We'll run through June 30th. We have a great lineup of speakers. We've got Dan Halsey, Bryce Ruddock, Amy Strauss, Doug Crouch. Those are all published. Well, Bryce, Dan, and Amy are all published authors.
Oh, great.
So, and then, we still have tickets for sale. So if you're in the region, we're in Southwest Michigan and Bloomingdale, Michigan. So if you're anywhere within out to Chicago or down to Indianapolis or Detroit or even further, we welcome you to come on out. So.
Yeah, I was telling you before, I'm in Ann Arbor area, so it's not too far from me. Maybe I'll be able to make it out to a day. I know I can't do the whole weekend, but talking to you is like, man, I got to hang out with these people.
Yeah. Well, and Saturday is our big day. Sunday is only a half a day, and Friday we really don't have anything. It's just people setting up.
So hit Saturday if you can't do the whole thing. But that's great, and I hope people hearing this can join you. And well, thanks again, Braden. This is awesome. Let's keep the Permaganic conversation rolling and connected, and maybe at some point we'll bring you in to talk to PINA and sort of like get it on PINA's agenda, because I don't think it is currently, but as we're building out the bioregions and starting to do those conversations a bit more, I think this is a critical piece to add to it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. It's been really great.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And thanks everybody who's here live. And if you're checking this out later, thank you for listening. And reach out to Braden at this greatlakesandrivers.org. Is that probably the best place to reach out to you?
Yep. greatriversandlakes.org.
Oh, sorry, I wrote it down wrong. Dang it. Sorry, everybody. My bad. And then if you're a farmer or a homesteader and you want to get into the Permaganic thing, fill out that form on the website and they'll reach out to you. So thanks again, Braden. I appreciate your time and nice to talk to you. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.